So this year's presentation is for three different internships who have worked collaboratively together. We have four Russell Brinsfield interns, one MPower intern, and one University of Maryland, Baltimore Eastern Shore fellow. And now we're going to get into some introductions. My name is Isabella. I'm a Brinsfield intern, and I recently just graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in environmental science and policy.
Hello, I'm Jishan. I'm a Brinsfield intern majoring in environmental science and technology at the University of Maryland.
Hi, I'm Eileen. I also recently graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in environmental science and policy.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a second year law school student who was recently attending University of Maryland, but just transferred to UNLV out in Nevada.
And hi, I'm Manas. I'm a senior at UMD studying neuroscience with a minor in human development, and I'm also the MPower intern.
Hi there, I'm Patrick. I'm a rising 2L at UMB Law in Baltimore, and I'm the UMB Law Eastern Shore Fellow for the summer.
All right, so our agenda today consists of 4 different sections. First, we'll be explaining our projects, then our field trips. Next, we'll explain our interviews and meetings. And then lastly, we'll hold a space for questions from the audience at the very end. More specifically, this summer, we had the opportunity to explore multiple projects, and today we will be explaining each one in a little bit more detail in the following order. So first, we'll be doing the Maryland Department of Agriculture Strategic Plan for Local Food Production and Procurement. Then we'll go ahead and speak about the Maryland Department of Agriculture state definition of agriculture. And then Manaz will share her work on the MPower local food procurement project. Patrick will share his work on the Maryland Public Interest Law project. And then we'll go ahead and speak about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, roadmaps. And then finally, the Chesapeake Conservancy and Sea Grant collaboration on the Best Management Practices Definition project that is for use by the Harford County Soil Conservation District. And just before we get into it, I just want to clarify that most of us did not know what the food system was before this internship. And these projects ultimately helped us understand what goes into that system and the many stakeholders and processes involved. So the first project I will share is the strategic plan to increase production and procurement of local foods. And before getting into any project details, I do want to share some brief history. As of May 2025, House Bill 9 was passed, which included a line that requires the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council to write a strategic plan to increase the production and procurement of local food in the state. And ultimately, the Maryland Department of Agriculture offered to spearhead this project as an involved member of the leadership team. And then because this is such a big undertaking for just one entity, we as the interns were invited to help provide the information for the background research so the agency can have a thorough understanding when it came to the report writing. And our work will ultimately impact the agriculture community and potentially provide new markets and new information, which will provide access to more healthy food to a broader audience. Additionally, this plan will also help the local and statewide economy and help to guide how we strategically increase both our production and procurement in the state of Maryland. So now on to the nitty-gritty details of this project. To begin our research, the Maryland Department of Agriculture sent us an outline of the plan, and we were tasked with conducting research and writing narratives for each question. Main sections included questions and information on food supply chain infrastructure, institutional and public procurement, and policy and governance. So essentially, our work will highlight many parts of the food system throughout the state. And in order to answer these questions, we spoke with various experts on the topic and conducted online research through previous reports and documents. Experts included a wide range of people, including nonprofit organizations, farmers, MDA staff, food council staff, and other experts in the field. As you can see on this infographic, farmers are just one part of the food system puzzle. They're involved in various steps. So some of these expert interviews that we had and other research outside of traditional agriculture routes helped us to answer questions about the other parts of the food system, such as processing, distribution, and consumers in the state of Maryland. Although we are not yet completed with this, our work will move the needle just a bit further on the history of this project. The food system is complex, as you can see, and this plan will aim to address different sectors of the state into one cohesive manner to ultimately further improve the livelihoods of both farmers and consumers. And it also emphasizes that everything we did this summer, all of our projects combined and beyond, is interconnected, as you will see in the upcoming project descriptions. So ultimately, our project will guide MDA's ability to write the final plan and impact many, many people. And I know I can speak for all the interns when I say this has definitely honed our research and our communication skills, as well as our organizational and interviewing skills.
All right, and now I'm going to be explaining the state definition of agriculture. So believe it or not, Maryland does not have a standardized statewide definition of agriculture. Currently, individual state agencies define agriculture based on their specific missions and the activities that fall within their jurisdiction. This leads to misunderstandings and uncertainty when making policy decisions and in the execution of said policies, and it creates a confusing landscape for agriculturalists. To address this issue, our team was tasked with conducting a comprehensive review of how agriculture and related terms are defined across Maryland state agencies. The goal of our research is to support the Maryland Department of Agriculture and the Governor's Intergovernmental Commission for Agriculture as they consider adopting a unified statewide definition. Throughout the project, we worked closely with Mr. Harrison Palmer from the Maryland Department of Agriculture to ensure our findings would be useful in informing this potential policy development. So our methods included using COMAR, which is the Code of Maryland Regulations, and agency websites to investigate how 38 state agencies define agriculture and terms related to agriculture, such as farming or aquaculture. We looked at whether each state agency defined agriculture, mentioned it without defining it, defined related terms, or provided no definition at all. We compiled these findings into a spreadsheet with tabs for technical analysis and terminology comparison. And then we also wrote a short memo to highlight our findings. And then on the right here is a screenshot of the COMAR website. The left column lists all 38 agencies. And we just used the search bar to narrow down our search. And then as mentioned before, we put all the agencies and terms into a spreadsheet for organization. Each agency had its own tab, which are listed at the bottom. And this is a screenshot for the Department of Natural Resources tab. We organized the terms in the first column in alphabetical order. And for each term, we provided the agency's definition, if one exists, along with a subtitle of where the term was found, any stated exceptions, and direct link for source materials and COMAR code. And then we also made a technical comparison tab that lists each agency and if and how they define agriculture and the major themes. This tab just summarizes the findings of all the agency tabs. And then we made a drop-down option to explain how agencies view agriculture, and then agency goals for the central term of agriculture and the comparison to other agencies. And then as I mentioned before, we also created a memo, and this paper just discusses the cross-agency summaries of definitions as well as patterns and trends. So according to our research, only 5 out of the 38 agencies outlined in COMAR have an original formal definition of agriculture. These agencies listed here from narrowest to broadest scope it starts with the Maryland or the Department of the Environment, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Labor, the Critical Area Commission, and the Department of Emergency Management. Beyond that, several agencies mentioned the term agriculture, but do not actually define it. And then we found a group of agencies that don't define agriculture itself, but do include definitions for related terms like aquaculture, agricultural land use, or agricultural products. And then finally, over half the agencies reviewed provided no definition at all. So our research highlighted some trends in the existing 5 definitions. Most consistently define agriculture as involving crop production, livestock or poultry raising, and forestry. Many also include supporting practices such as irrigation, pest management, and conservation techniques. Some even go further by including processing, storage, and transportation, like dairy processing or hatchery operations as part of the agricultural system. However, where these definitions differ most is in their level of detail and intended use. Some focus on agriculture's economic importance, while others focus more narrowly on the specific activities that fall under agricultural work or land use. And then again, all of our findings were sent to Mr. Harrison Palmer and will be used when considering to implement a statewide definition of agriculture.
So now I'm going to talk about the local food procurement project, but before going into details of this project, I just want to go over some background information. So the Maryland Certified Local Farm and Fish Program in 2020 set a goal of 20% for state agencies and 4 universities to encourage the procurement of local food for certified farms. However, to this date, this percentage has not been met, and in fact, it is very low. As you can see, according to the 2024 Maryland Certified Local Farm and Fish Program report, it's at 0.25%. So the University of Maryland's Agricultural Law Education Initiative, in partnership with Maryland's Department of Agriculture, is conducting a study on identifying and addressing the legal and logistical barriers associated with local food procurement to increase Maryland's Farm to Institutions program. And as an MPower intern, my main focus was working in different sectors of this project. This is because the main 3 goals of this project was to first determine the knowledge gap that exists in local food purchasing between important stakeholders such as farmers, distributors, and institutions, as they all play a part in the local food supply chain, and then collect the Maryland-centered data by creating focus groups as well as surveys that will be distributed to both farmers, distributors, and institutions. And lastly, creating educational resources to fill in the gaps found. So to help with this project, I first began by reviewing all the recent research on local food procurement practices in other states as well as outside of the United States. I used studies, current reports, published articles, and also recent case studies focusing on overall local food procurement and also challenges associated with it. I then compiled all of these obstacles into a list of inquiries for the surveys that will be sent out to both distributors, institutions, and farmers. To do this, I compared the language and also terminology used in other reports to figure out the commonalities as well as some of the differences. And also I combined them in a way that the common terms can be used across the report for better understanding and also reliable results. Lastly, I used my research to write a literature review that could reflect all the research that has been done around legal and logistical barriers, and as well as some recommendation that could help to increase the procurement of local food. So as you can see, in this slide, I've included all the list of potential barriers for across different sectors. The ones that are not highlighted are the ones that are similar across the farmers distribution and institution survey, but the ones that are highlighted are some of the differences that are within different barriers that are present maybe in one sector or maybe in 2 other sectors. So some common trends that I noticed during my research was that seasonality, markets access, packaging, labeling requirements, food safety requirements, contract duration, some regulatory barriers, and logistic and infrastructure was common barriers that was mentioned across the 3 different sectors of food supply chain for farm to institution programs. But there were some differences along the way. For example, while farmers were reported facing the barriers of access to high quality storage or cold storage, for institution and distribution, the traceability of the requirements for locally sourced food was a major barrier. Similarly, for farmers, the availability of information on selling to institution was a barrier, while on the other hand, for the distribution and institution, the delivery and invoices was one of the barriers mentioned across the reports. So for the future of this project, my goal is to collect Maryland's specific data through surveys that speaks to similarly identified issues and help policymakers better understand the educational and policy approaches that will help to increase local food procurement. And lastly, create educational and infographic material to support the increase of local food procurement by tackling these barriers. My hope for this project is to basically create an education material that can be used both for this project and as well as the strategic plan for the production and procurement of local food. So policy research on local food procurement, this was another sub-project of mine that I worked with, and as there were like some policies in our state that could help increase local food procurement. So as a result, my main project was to investigate local food procurement goals and practices in other states and determine whether they're mandatory measures or optional measures, as well as also looking into state programs that help to increase local food procurement. So for this project, my method was to first examine recent publications, laws, state organization pertaining to regional food procurement regulations in other states. I also use recent reports as a sort of like a starting point to see what kinds of research terms I could use to progress through this research, as well as to see what policies other states have found already and use that information to see whether those policies still exist or not. Along the way, I also researched some state program or incentive programs that could help in increasing local food procurement. And also, I put together all of this data into a Google spreadsheet as well as a Google document that could potentially be utilized for both my own project and also the strategic plan. As you can see, this is the types of policies that I found for local food procurement. There are 8 types of policies. The tiebreaker preference is when the in-state producer is chosen over the out-of-state producer, even if everything, including the quality, price, terms, are the same. Reasonable exceed preference is when the in-state producer is favored despite the higher price, and even if the other criteria were similar. Price percentage is when the state preference has set a percentage limit in terms of price. And state geographic preference is when the products are preferred based on state geography. Reciprocal preference is when the state gives the preference to the in-state producer, similar to the amount given to the out-of-state producer by their own state. The local food purchase quotas is when there are specific laws that require a certain amount of local food to be from the local producers in that state. Local food incentives are financial incentives that help for local food purchase. Small purchase threshold is when the states are not allowed for competitive bid process if the annual purchase is under a certain dollar threshold. And this is the spreadsheet that I've created. As you can see, includes all the states with the types of policies that they have and whether they're mandatory and voluntary measures. I also have included a section for whether if they have any goals that for the local food procurement, if those goals have been achieved or not. If you go further, this is the 2 states that I want to mainly focus on, Colorado and Maine. As you can see, I have listed all the policies that I found that helps in local food procurement, which ties to either reasonably exceeds preference, reciprocal preference, and small purchase threshold for Colorado. As you can see, there's also a difference in Maine where they have local food purchase quotas and 2 incentive programs, one reasonably exceeds preference law, and then 1 small purchase threshold. And this is also the state programs that I have found throughout other states. As you can see, some of these are nationwide, and while some are particularly in other states. And for my research, I mostly found farm-to-school programs that have a lot of information for local food procurement, so I also included those as well. So my future goal for this project is to keep investigating policies and including my findings into this spreadsheet, as well as the literature review that I've done for the local food procurement project. And my goal is to basically input all of this data about the legal and policies into the strategic plan as well, so that it could be used to help policymakers and create education materials for increasing of local food procurement.
All right, I'll step in next. As the UMD Law Eastern Shore Fellow for the summer, I had the pleasure of working and researching with a multitude of people, including a senior research fellow at ALEI, which was previously mentioned, the Agricultural Law Education Initiative, and a past Eastern Shore Law Fellow from Sea Grant on the Eastern Shore, who is now Deputy State's Attorney. Unfortunately for time, I will only be presenting on 2 of these research projects today. So first of all, with our Eastern Shore Food Policy Council research, I worked alongside Nathan and Dr. Valiant Bruce from Washington College on the Eastern Shore, and we conducted research on the best foundational and sustainable practices that could be utilized by the Lower Shore Food Policy Council. Originally, I had been delving deep into the resources that could be utilized, strategies, and legal work that could be understood to help developing Food Policy Council, as the one on the Lower Eastern Shore is. But I quickly adapted when we kind of had a change of pace and got to work directly with the data itself and with Nathan and Dr. Bruce, which was a great change of pace, and I was very grateful for it because I kind of got my head out of the book and into some more thrilling and direct material, which was really great. And I was very happy to do that. Moving on. So we found that there's we're hoping to find certain efficacies in strategies that are comparable along the entire eastern half of the United States. We've been comparing the counties from the eastern side of the Mississippi. So we've had quite a large domain to work with, but as we've condensed, we have found a few that have helped I'll say, develop our understanding of what Food Policy Council strategies will work in the Lower Eastern Shore for each of those counties, and hopefully we will find some that work for them as a group as well. Into my second project, the transfer on death deeds research. Now you might be asking 2 questions, which is why am I here and why do I care and what is this? So first, what is this? This is a life estate planning tool that can be utilized by anyone, but most notably for our sake, the agricultural community and farmers who otherwise don't want to lose any rights to their property while they are alive. However, in the case of their passing, would like certain people to take over. Without getting too much into the nitty-gritty of it, because there is such a little percentage of farmers who have life estate tools and life estate planning, transfer on death deed legislation, which has been passed in about 30 states, can be very helpful in creating structures that aid the ensuing people and the people gathering the property to cheaply, effectively, and without litigation inherit property. The beauty of this too is, moving on to the next slide, in a lot of these states, and this is also co-research, which I will get to in a minute, the Uniform Real Property Transfer on Death Act has been utilized, which I found to be the most successful portion of the laws that have been passed countrywide and the most prevalent. I've been working alongside Mrs. Samantha Capaldo of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and just doing this comparative analysis, I've learned a ton about how much we can help our farmers in Maryland and beyond by making their end-of-life scenarios much easier. Sorry for the Debbie Downer on this fine Monday, but this has been a very exciting project, and I've been happy to learn so much about life estate tools available to our agricultural workers.
Next, I will talk about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs of the SNAP roadmaps. So this was one for a smaller project that we did, where we focused on helping farmers access a new market to the SNAP recipients. So many farmers do not realize that they can significantly increase their customer base by accepting SNAP into their farm. But the process to get authorized might be very confusing or also very time consuming, especially for this small scale farmers. So we created this poster / roadmaps to support that. First, we developed a general SNAP roadmap for technical service providers and producers, which can help guide farmers through accepting benefit payments. Then we decided a step-by-step event planning guide and a farmer roadmap. So on the right is a farmer-friendly roadmap that covers everything from eligibility documentation and training to advertising and staying compliant. And to the left, it walks organizers through how to host a sign-up event, like choosing an outreach method, picking dates that works for the farmers, and making sure that there's support before, during, and after the event.
Hi, everyone. So I'll be presenting on the Hartford County Best Management Project definitions. This project was in collaboration with Sea Grant and Chesapeake Conservancy to provide Hartford County Soil Conservation District with the information they needed. We also worked with another intern, Ariana, who is a communications intern for Sea Grant from Johns Hopkins University, as well as Sea Grant Watershed Restoration Specialist Eric Buell and Claire Cambardella. This was actually our first project of the summer and my first introduction to real agricultural research. And our task was to define and organize conservation best management practices, otherwise known as BMPs. These are practices which best minimize negative environmental impacts. One example of this is cover crops, which are plants that cover soil to prevent runoff and improve soil health, which was founded by no other than the late Dr. Russell Brinsfield himself to aid nutrient reductions to the bay. And our goal was to create a compendium, a clear, useful reference tool for an upcoming web-based tool that will educate users on what BMPs they can use on their land. And each BMP includes a definition, why someone would use it, and at least 3 vetted links, often from the Natural Resources Conservation Service documents or guides. We sorted the practices into topic tabs like soil testing, cover crops, integrated pest management, agroforestry. And for each practice, we either summarize information ourselves or link to reputable sources, mostly the NRCS conservation standards. This allowed for flexibility while keeping quality consistent. Here you can see the sheets provided us by Hartford. It's diagramming out the list of BMPs and themes. You can see our agricultural structure is divided into small acres and urban agriculture. Then it's further narrowed down into BMPs. For example, under small farms, we have soil testing, followed by livestock or crops. And under crops, there are integrated pest management, cover crops, conservation tillage, and alley cropping. One of the hardest parts, however, was organizing the work across 7 interns, one of whom I previously mentioned was in a different department. And we had to take time to figure out how much detail we wanted to include, how to split the work, and how to especially keep the voice the same among the 7 of us. The hybrid internship format also added another layer to this, where we would split between remote and person. And so to manage this, we sometimes met in person to coordinate better, and one meeting was held at the Baltimore Agricultural Institute. We eventually developed a system with clear expectations depending on the tab's color, as well as learned the importance of getting consensus as a project is being envisioned. And finally, we had to balance clarity with audience needs, not just an academic source, but as a practical source people can actually use. The final product was a working draft of a tiered BMP resource that mimics the diagram. This helps farmers and landowners understand what options exist and how to best build ecological resilience. Our work was made, though, to support the new Hartford County Conservation Planning tool. This is supposed to be a user-friendly digital guide for landowners and farmers, where one feature allows the tool, based on the user's location, to look at a map and tell them what BMPs would best match their needs and their land. People choose categories from there, like erosion or soil health, and the tool provides the information and BMPs. This helps fight educational and resource barriers to regular people being able to implement BMPs by providing them with a new innovative interface that plans, prioritizes, and explains the real needs of actual locations. Our definition and links were designed to match those BMP categories and educate those users. Personally, I learned how hard it is just to build something from the ground up, as well as taught myself some BMPs, and how important it is to make policy tools usable and accessible to the general public.
Well, throughout our internship, we had the opportunity to go on 6 field trips, and the very first one was the Outstanding Dream Alpaca Farm. This event was hosted by the Chesapeake Agriculture Innovation Center, the cake. And this was my first time seeing an alpaca. We also had the opportunity to listen to a lot of new business owners about how they grew their businesses. Something that stood out to me that day was how valuable these alpacas are. The owner of the farm was telling us that he sold one of his alpaca for $30,000, which challenged my perception of what farming looks like and showed that there is a wide variety of ways to succeed in agriculture beyond traditional crops and livestock.
So another one of our field trips was to Red Acres Hydroponics, which is a sustainable farm located right here in Maryland. We had the pleasure of meeting the owner, Mr. Brian Williams, who kindly welcomed us and gave us a tour of the place. Mr. Williams shared that due to rising demand and competition with other farmers, he transitioned from traditional farming practices to hydroponics, which is a method of growing plants without soil using nutrient-rich water instead. We learned that hydroponically grown crops have several important advantages. They use 2/3 less water, require no pesticides, and need fewer fertilizers compared to traditional farming. This means the produce is not only better for our health, but also for the environment. And Red Acres Hydroponics is a great example of how farmers are adapting to meet modern challenges by embracing sustainable practices that protect our natural resources while continuing to feed our communities.
Then we went to the Fair Hill Farm. This was my favorite out of all of them. We got to learn about the process of how a cow is being milked every day. The Fry family showed us around how a cow is being raised there from a calf to 6-year-old. One thing that stood out to me was how technological advanced this farm was. There was around 900 cows, and with the help of technology, there was only one person working to regulate all of them. This technology increases farmer safety, increases efficiency of working on other parts of the farm, such as increasing the market production.
Our next stop was to Modern Stone Age Kitchen, which is a health food restaurant located in Chestertown. The name and especially the motto, Eat Like a Human, were quite familiar because we were first introduced to them during our very first farm tour that Jishan talked about on Outstanding Alpaca Farm. At the Chesapeake Agricultural Innovation Center, CAIC, they shared their backstory and philosophy, and it's about reconnecting people to their ancestral way of eating, focusing on nourishing foods using traditional methods. And their approach uses nutrient-dense ingredients and preparation techniques like fermentation and nose-to-tail butchery to make those nutrients safe and available. Another big focus of theirs is just how dedicated and invested they are in the local food chain with local sourcing and minimal processing. This philosophy is outlined in their book, Eat Like a Human. And being in their actual restaurant helped us see how their values are applied in practice and, excuse the pun, but taste the end result of the themes of our work, and also showed us how one idea between just a mother and a father can grow not only into a business, but a community hub. Our next stop was to Ross and Wooten in her law office, and this was also a small transactional firm located in Chestertown. This is run by Wooten and her daughter, the two attorneys at the firm, and they serve the local agricultural community. They often handle property-related issues like buying and selling land, wills and estates, and other real estate matters. But they talked about the unique legal challenges in a rural farming community. For example, many small-scale farmers rely on handshake deals, not formal contracts, and this leads to a lot of legal confusion and risk. Also, solar company contracts are a major recurring issue. Farmers are offered contracts that seem too good to be true, which often means that they are, and lawyers, they want to stress the importance of legal review before signing these documents. But they also talked about the lifestyle of small town lawyering, like running into clients at the grocery store and needing to protect client confidentiality even in casual settings, and how much reputation and word of mouth spreads in these fast communities. This gave us insight into a different legal path, not only me, but the other interns who are prospective law school students. And not the typical urban big law path, but the grounded community-based legal work, which is built on relationships, trust, and local knowledge, something we often find in agricultural communities and something I personally gravitate towards more.
So our last tour was a food pantry tour. In this tour, we met with Jocelyn Tedwell and the CS graduate interns working with Dr. Henley. Our main goal for this tour was to observe how food is stored and distributed in a way that's best aligned with the food safety requirements. So we looked at the practices that are being used to receive, store, and distribute the food in a safe way, and how could information about food safety be incorporated into how the sites operate, basically. We also discussed the opportunities to weave this information and practice into a physical layout that could be distributed to food hubs around the state. We first toured the St. Bernard Church, where they were getting ready to distribute food. One thing we all observed was just how much fresh produce they were getting from grocery stores. Also, we noticed that the food safety precautions that they were already taking place, for example, hand washing, wearing gloves, and also while distributing food, and also the fact that the majority of the food distributed was healthy, it was really thoughtful to us. We then had a second visit to the Lindeben Food Hub, where Anna Bevan, who was the site lead, welcomed us and showed us around of how they store the food that they receive and what their schedule looked like. So one interesting thing that we looked at and basically surprised us was how nicely the food were already organized based on the food safety recommendation that they had in that site, and also how they were organizing those store food based on a specific schedule that they were following.
All right, so as you now know, this summer consisted of various forms of research, half of which included interviews and meetings to help us with our projects, as well as give us some networking and career advice. So although we did not directly interview him, we met with Secretary Addix from the MDA to go over the definition of ag project. We also interviewed Deputy Secretary Suzanne Dorsey from the Maryland Department of the Environment to ultimately gain more insight about research using COMAR, as mentioned before, for this project, and additional working opportunities for our future. Harrison Palmer, who is the Executive Secretary of the MDA, was also another resource to help us with this project. Further down the road, we met with Elise Chalmers and Julian Kroboth, both from CAKE, to speak about the aggregation and distribution aspect of the strategic plan, since both have experience with supply chains. Then for the value-added products section of the strategic plan, we met with Martin Prue, who is the value-added agricultural specialist from the MDA.
For our professional and career meetings, we first met with Dr. Ken Steber, the Associate Research Scientist at the Y Research and Education Center. We met with Karen Federer, Administrator from Maryland Farm and Food Programs at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. We met with the Executive Director and Associate Vice Provost Adrian Archer and her staff also from the Maryland Strategic Partnership MPowering the State. We then went on to meet with Jocelyn Tedwell, the Maryland SNAP-IT Statewide Health Food Access Coordinator, and also Dr. Shauna Helney from the Family and Consumer Science Educator in the UMD Department of Nutrition Food Science. From the Maryland's Department of Environment, we also met with Gabby Leach, who was the Assistant Director of Air and Radiation Administration. We met with Jeremy Baker, the Director of Government Relations, and also Arnold Lott was the Deputy Program Manager for Compliance of Water and Science Administration. And lastly, to the next slide. We met with Allison Pross, the Senior Vice President for Programs at Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We met with Caroline Harper, Program Associate for Agriculture at the Kate Campbell Foundation. We met with Amy Jacobs, the Chesapeake Bay Director from the Nature Conservancy. We met with Harry Huntley, Agriculture Policy Lead from the Environmental Policy Innovation Center. And lastly, we met with Amanda Pollack, the Director of Training from the Center for Watershed Protection.
So some of the key takeaways that really stood out to us as intern at first is networking matters. One of the big lessons that almost everyone shared with us was the importance of asking for help, but doing it very professionally. Building genuine relationships and not being afraid to reach out can open a lot of doors. Next is take nothing personally. Whether it's criticism, rejection, or challenging interaction, it's part of learning process. Detaching emotionally can help us grow and stay focused. I resonated with this one the most, which is to be fearless and not be afraid to fail. Many of the people we spoke to emphasize that failure is often what teaches us the most. It's better to try and stay stumble than to hold back out of fear. A lot of us here are recent graduates or about to graduate, so we're still figuring out what career we should go to. So I believe take time to figure things out is a great takeaway because we learned that it's okay to take the time between undergrad and professional school, and our entire career path does not have to be mapped out right away. The last two we have is to stay open and being flexible and saying yes to new experiences. And it's okay not to have the answer and to agree to disagree.
So, some skills that we picked up along the way were legal research for those of us that are those prospective law school students and early law school students, interviewing and networking skills, which was a very valuable question building and question asking activity that we did multiple times, as you just heard, writing and editing these memos that we were putting together, our Excel spreadsheets, our documents, all required a plethora of writing and editing skills that we adopted along the way and we were taught, which would be valuable here and beyond. We were lucky enough to have a big team this year, which also included some other people who we worked closely with, other interns and other associates. We got to problem solve some issues that as they came up, which was a nice way to teach us adaptability and quick thinking. Technical skills and communication skills, we got to master through all of our projects, but notably, I think I took the most away from our interviews for both of those things because both of those are so relevant and both of those. And then that last one, adaptability, which I've already touched on a little bit, but being able to change our pace or change our strategy as needed for the benefit of the Food Council or MDA, whoever it might be was a very valuable resource. And then we would like to get close to wrapping up here by thanking everybody on this call and otherwise who uh, helped us out this summer. Firstly, Nancy, Megan, and Rachel for being great mentors and helping us along the way with all of the various things that came up and all of your help. The Y Center for hosting and celebrating us throughout the summer and being a great place that we could work together and collaborate. The Baltimore Agriculture Center for letting us work in your facilities. All of the hosts of our various field trips and visits, the experience you gave us cannot be quantified and it was incredibly valuable. We want to thank you for that. All of the interviewees that we've previously mentioned and who may be here or may not be here, we appreciate the knowledge that you've given us, all the advice you've given us. I can tell you I personally took quite a bit from that. And knowing that I don't have to have it all together was a very nice thing, as Deshaun mentioned. I personally would like to thank the law school, Maryland Public Interest Law Project, and UMB, Adrian and MPower for supporting us along the way, and everyone else who we may not have mentioned, including some of you out in the audience who weren't previously listed but came for support and came to support us, whatever relationship we might have to you. We're very appreciative of that. So with that, do you have any questions? And if you would like to reach out to us, we will leave our contact information up, but we will answer questions now. Thank you for your time. Okay.
We have one question in the chat, and it's, did any of you have an aha moment while working on your projects?
I can get started. I guess for mine, it's kind of like related to legal research, but like for mine, I always thought that for statutes, there isn't like a database or some sort of stuff. Like it's just like you go to Google search and like they show up to you. But then like going through Comor and like looking at, oh my God, all these laws are basically listed in a specific database that can just, it's easy, searchable, was really like a whole moment. I was like, oh my God, like law actually have like its own database. So that was like really interesting to know.
I can pick up next, actually. Ironically enough, it was our first day. I grew up in suburbia outside of Chicago, so I didn't have a lot of agriculture experience, as Eileen mentioned a little bit earlier, with Food Policy Council, but I specifically didn't have a lot of ag experience. And we were doing a tour of the Hughes Center, and we talked about how they were changing wheat products to be shorter so that they weren't impacted by the wind. And I thought that how valuable that was for farmers and for retention, and for the health of the crop. And it had never even crossed my mind. And I thought it was such like a fun aha moment that like we just started and here I was learning like how valuable this can really be in the world.
I mean, for me, it's not really a aha moment, but it was very surprising to see that a lot of the agency has different definition for agriculture, which is very interesting because I didn't think of it. Before this, I also thought that agriculture would have the same definition, whatever it is, but seeing that different agency defines agriculture in a different way was interesting, and I did not know that. Yeah.
I can also mention something. My biggest like aha moment, it wasn't technically like a point of information, but it was just during this entire internship. I grew up in Hong Kong in an urban city. I also wasn't exposed to many agricultural issues my whole life. But since I was little, I said that I wanted to be a farmer. Don't really know where that came from. And then I thought I wanted to go into corporate law as I got older. But then this internship was my first exposure back to my passion and just being able to work on these projects. I kind of had that aha moment of just like knowing that this is the right path for me and just being so excited on being able to continue kind of the work that we've been doing in my life.
I guess I can go. I think for me, I came into this internship with a very environmental focused lens. And I think it's definitely taught me that farmers don't want to be like polluting the earth, polluting their land. They want to make the most out of their produce and make the most benefit, whatever. So we need to be working with farmers, like environmentalists, and farmers need to be working together to not only be more sustainable, but agriculture is not going anywhere. So we need to be more sustainable and be viable and feed the human population.
Yeah, and going off of Izzy, I grew up kind of around farms. I did 4-H when I was younger. So I kind of an idea, but this internship just emphasized the idea that farmers and agriculture is super, super important. And it sounds super obvious, like, oh, that shouldn't be your aha moment. But a lot of people don't realize that farmers are the core of the food system. Like agriculture is the core of the food system. And it's super important to have policies and regulations that help them and have people aware of what they do.
So can I ask a question live, an audio question?
Go ahead, Ken.
So on the first slide, seems like you spent a bit of time on the idea of local sourcing of food by institutions. If I understood that first slide, like the goal is 20%, but we're not even at maybe 1%. If I understood that slide right, it was like 0.25%.
Yeah.
So is that right? Did I read that slide right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your sense of why, what do we need to do if we actually are serious about that 20% goal? I mean, why are we having so little success, and what do you think needs to happen to get somewhere even close?
I think we can first start with actually giving better information for farmers and like how to sell directly to institution, because I think that's like one of the main things that I noticed was like just the lack of information for like, okay, how are we going to connect the farmers to institution? And if that's the problem, then how do we connect farmers to distributors? And also in terms of the distributors and institution, then comes like, I guess the main problem is like, the contracts and like also everything included in that contract, like such as the duration, the types of food that the institution are looking for, kind of like the seasonalities, the quality of local food. So all those things are kind of like some of the barriers that are kind of are the reasons for that lower percentage. But I feel like if we have like availability of information and also like maybe kind of like policies that could help to kind of like ease out those contracts restriction, and also like to kind of help out with those processes, could really help us to like see an increase in these like local food procurement goals.
I think also, like I mentioned before, the food system is extremely complex. There are so many moving parts, and a lot of different stakeholders working together on this. So I think maybe like a streamlined approach to some of these things, like easy communication and just a way for everybody to fully understand how to work on these issues would be the best way to begin.
All right, thanks. I mean, did you guys send out your suggestions to anybody?
We're trying to like get all of them like together and then like hopefully like send out. I have written them in like the literature review that I've created for them, and like I'm planning to like add more because there are like some state programs that also like have like for example, there was one, I think it was in Idaho, that had like a locally grown like a kind of like logo that kind of helps to sell the local produce. So maybe like those kind of ideas, like I'm trying to combine all of them together and like add them in like a literature review.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone doesn't have any other questions, we're just gonna leave the interns' contacts if you want to direct them in the future, or follow them on LinkedIn. And if you want any resource materials, of course, check in with Nancy or Megan at those emails provided there. But we want to thank everyone for your time and a wonderful turnout and audience behavior and involvement. Thank you, everyone.